Morning, we have four very, very special, incredible speakers who are going to help us understand one other incredibly important level of what happened on October 7th and what's happening in Israel. Thinking over the past 3 days that we've had here, I think we've very, very quickly been exposed and tried to expose you to the tragedy that has taken place here. We met with hostage families. We saw rehabilitation in the hospital. We spoke to people who are on the front lines right now. We were in Kfar Aza yesterday. We were at the Nova site. And I have chills as I talk about it, but we were exposed to just the incredible atrocity. But one area that we haven't really gone into depth on that is really, really critical is the element of the truly awful, premeditated, and devastating sexual violence that took place on October 7th. And when we were working together to plan this week, our feeling was that we cannot complete our time here, particularly as a women's organization, without going into depth on this particular issue. And so we've brought people here who can speak and share with us and help us to bear witness to what has happened and to begin to take action surrounding that. So I'm going to just briefly introduce our four panelists. We're going to hear first Sherry Mendez, and from Fochav and Kayam Levi, we will speak in depth and really the witness component of this issue. And then we'll hear from Vora Bauman and Tamara. So I'd like to begin by asking Sherry to come.
I'm going to refer to testimony I gave as a representative of the Army to the UN on December 4th. Some of you may have been there. There were people, Hadassah was one of the sponsors of the event. Okay. My name is Sherry Mendez. I am from Jerusalem. I'm an architect by profession and I also run a charity to benefit needy breast cancer patients. I am also a member of a reserve unit within the Army Rabbinet that's tasked with all procedures that relate to identification and burial preparation for fallen Israeli female soldiers. It's a special unit that was created in 2010 as more combat units began to be open to female soldiers. You mostly know, I'm sure, that in Jewish tradition, burial societies tended to be segregated by sex, with women tending to women and men to men. This is a gesture of respect to deceased so that their families know that women were present during the identification process and they're in charge of the burial preparation of their daughters. I'm going to tell you what we witnessed at the Shura base, where all of the victims of the Hamas massacre were brought since October 7th. I will not overstate or understate anything. I'm going to only tell you things that we have seen with our own eyes. Our unit trained for mass casualty events, but we really just about ever imagine anything like what happened. In fact, it was a unit that, thank God, over the years was called on very, very, very rarely, as you can imagine. Our main concern in the first days was identification so that families could be notified. Only after identification was their preparation for burial. I arrived at the base at 7 a.m. on Sunday, October 8th, and it was unimaginable in two ways. The first way was in scale. It's huge. Every room was filled with black body bags. Many of them were dripping. The smell was unbearable. It is impossible to overemphasize the number of bodies. The refrigerated trucks were waiting outside, filled with bodies. It was a scale that Israel has never dealt with before. There was a sense of shock and despair. Our unit worked in shifts 24/7, carefully accompanying the victims, female soldiers only in our case, as they went through the identification process, and this was led by teams of medical professionals, dentists, and other experts. Teams have been and are still working at the Shula base around the clock since the war started. Second shock was the extent of the cruelty we witnessed with our own eyes. Here are some examples of things we saw at the base. Victims were often shot in several places in the body and then many times in the head. Heads and faces were always covered in blood, shot in the eyes, face, and skull. Almost everyone had blood still dripping from their ears, nose, other places, even days later. It was often impossible for families to be shown faces, and it seemed as if mutilation of these women's faces was an objective in their murder. Some heads were bashed so badly that brains were spilling out and had to be collected for burial. Jewish law requires that body parts be rescued and buried as much as possible. Even bloody clothing is buried with the body, even cloths that we use to cool blood, even those are buried. Some were shot so many times at close range that their heads were almost blown off. In some cases, this was done after death, just out of cruelty. We know this because these wounds had no blood. The blood had been drained from the first shots. Many of these women arrived with their eyes open, their mouths and grimaces, their fists clenched in pain. And we all felt their bodies were telling a story to us still. I remember one young soldier whose arm was broken in so many places that it was difficult to place her in the white linen shroud, the burial shroud. Her leg too. In her case, the entire left side of her body was shredded, torn open, most likely by a grenade. It is customary, as you know, to place a body in a burial shroud, but in many cases this wasn't possible, and we simply laid a white linen sheet on what remained. Many young women arrived in bloody, shredded rags or just in underwear, and their underwear was often very bloody. Our team commander saw several soldiers who were shot in the crotch, intimate parts, vaginas, or shot in a breast. This seemed to be a systematic genital mutilation of a group of victims. Some bodies could not be recovered until days later. You know that some of you were in Oslo, you know that some communities were dangerous for days after October 7th. And so we saw bodies in advanced stages of decomposition, terrible dark green color, completely covered with live maggots. We actually had a very hot Sukkot this year, so it was a bad situation. On more than one occasion, we were told to run. And as part of our job, we never wanted to leave these soldiers alone, not even for a minute. Someone on our team was always with the soldier. We always, even in the identification room, when we were working, to take off jewelry, to wash off jewelry, to do the non-medical preparation while the body was going through these sorts of things, you should just know that there was such compassion. This is an aside. You know, the teams were made up of all sectors of Israeli society, men, women, religious, not religious, every kind of ethnicity of Israeli citizen. Yet there was such respect for us, our team. We would always cover the person when there was no activity going on their body, DNA, fingerprinting. It was important to us that even modesty was respected during all the processes, and there was just such teamwork with everyone. It was actually there were beautiful moments, if you can imagine, in this gruesome process. But I was telling you that we were told to run. We didn't want to leave, but apparently bodies were arriving that were booby-trapped, and it was dangerous for the whole staff. And we had to go out of the building until sappers could come. So, you know, and there were also many, many rockets while we were working, and so we had to run to the safe room. It was, or on the way to the base and back, our shift, it was a very difficult time. Our unit has seen bodies that were beheaded or had limbs cut off, mutilated. One young woman came in with no legs, they had been cut off. You have to know that it was our job to open the body bags, and sometimes we didn't have warning of what we would see. Luckily, we had warning in that case, we're all regular people. Most of us are not anything to do with the medical profession. You know, this was a volunteer group until recently when the Army made it a reserve unit. So most of the people work in the Chevra Kadisha and the Burial Society in their private life, not me, but most of the other people. So this was a particularly difficult thing for non-medical people. We saw several severed heads. One had a large kitchen knife still embedded in the neck. Charred remains arrived and had to be identified and prepared for burial. Those bodies were burnt beyond recognition, often without arms and legs, beyond any human shape. Our only means of identification was by DNA, and this is made incredibly challenging if there is no tissue when bodies are burnt or badly decomposed. We sifted through piles of ashes that disintegrated as we touched them. Even that was buried. These soldiers were burnt alive at very high temperatures. These barbarians did not show these women any honor in life, but at least we showed them deep love and gentleness as our teams prepared them for burial. We had more than one time in the burial room. It was a room for women only, taking care of other women. I know this might sound strange or counterintuitive, but it was a very holy atmosphere in these rooms. We felt an obligation to love these women, and we knew that we were likely the last people that would ever see them. We held them in our hearts for a moment as if they were our daughters. I think every one of us has children who have served in the Army, men, boys, girls. And these could have been our daughters. Many of us have children this age. On a personal note, when we were doing this, I'm an architect, I deal with color, and after a while the colors became very dreary, black, brown, green, dark green, terrible colors. And all of a sudden you'd see a flash of color in this scene, in this body, this young victim, this young woman soldier. And it was a manicure often. And we as women would be very touched by that, because a manicure is so much more than a manicure. It's hope. It's a sign of hope. It's a sign that these soldiers thought, I'm going to go home this weekend and look beautiful. And that really broke us to see that, I have to say. Finally, as a child of a Holocaust survivor, I understand the importance of bearing witness, and that is why I keep speaking about this. It's very difficult to keep speaking, and it's getting more difficult, I have to say. These are unbearable stories, but I feel that on behalf of my people and my country, I am here to be the voice of those who cannot testify. I thank you for listening to this.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I'd like to know and invite Kochav.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dr. Kochav Ravi. These days, we're working on a huge report that is going to expose some of the crimes against women and children. And we are exposed since the beginning of the war to many videos, footages that are really horrifying. I feel the responsibility of being immersed in everything that happened, so I'll be able to bear witness and to give the most professional observation of what happened to the international community. Wednesday, next week, we're briefing the White House, and this is, it feels like a huge responsibility on our shoulders to share what happened. So now I'll go back to the beginning. And first I want to anchor myself before the 7th of October. So as Susie said, I'm a law professor. I teach international law, human rights, feminist theories, climate justice. This is what I do. This is who I am. I feel like I established the Dvorah Institute to really dedicate a lot of intellectual and and practical work on imagining or creating an equal society, thinking about the dreams that could be here in Israel and more globally. And since the 7th of October, I feel like I've been assigned a new role, not to my choice, and not even that one that I thought that I will carry even in the beginning, and that is the chair of the Civil Commission on Hamas's crimes against women and children. And really at the beginning it was a group of experts that I gathered to respond to the silence of the international community regarding what happened on the 7th of October. And so I'll start by saying that on the 7th of October, I spent time with my father at the hospital. He was hospitalized at Shiva Hospital. And we started realizing what's going on and receiving reports, horrific reports that you already know about people hiding in shelter, being burned alive, seeking help. In the first few days, we already knew about the hostage taking. Women and children were taken. Children were calling their relatives, saying that they are hiding in closets, after seeing their parents murdered, and really soldiers, young. I want to say, you know this, but I'm repeating to the international community that those soldiers are only high school graduates that have a mandatory service, and they were calling, many of them were women around the Gaza Strip. They were calling their parents, asking for help, and it was in the Nova Festival, of course. Anyway, as an international scholar, I knew that we are seeing crimes against humanity before our eyes. I knew that this is going to involve the international community very quickly. I knew that these are crimes that are going to also be tried internationally. And I must admit that in the first days I was working with the Israeli government on ways to attend to women's needs during the emergencies, making sure that women have representations in the emergency teams that were being formed. I did this because I drafted Israel's report on women during emergencies that was accepted as a government resolution in June 2022. So I knew what's going to happen, and I wanted to make sure that women take place in decision-making in this war. Anyway, so around the 8th day of the war, I started realizing that no one is responding, that the UN officials are either contextualizing the crimes, keeping silent. Very few express, moral clarity about what happened, and especially women's rights bodies. UN women's rights bodies have kept silent, and I very naively thought that once I'll gather the most credible information and send it to those officials at the UN, I'll be able to change it. We were deeply surprised by the fact that they are not responding, and I want to take a minute just to explain what does it mean to respond. So the UN has a responsibility, first of all, a mandate to secure human rights, right? This is their job. They're funded to do this. It's not, I want to differentiate between general human rights bodies. These are the bodies that are mandated in securing human rights. And so when I'm talking about response, I mean very initially to report that we're seeing atrocities, just to report the truth, to say something happened, something really bad happened. Secondly, expressing solidarity with the victims, expressing solidarity, condemning the crimes. And the third thing that is perhaps the most important is to offer help. And so, in light of the fact that they were not even initially reporting what happened, as I said, I thought very naively that I'm going to write to them. I initiated 3 petitions. One is a civil petition wanting to give a voice to women wherever they are, just anyone who wants to sign. thousands of women have signed this petition in just a few days. The second petition was a civil society petition in the name of women's rights organizations here in Israel. I think Adassa joined very quickly to this call. The third one was the most difficult, a legal report that I drafted regarding the crimes, and to which I started collecting information. I'll tell you about that in a second. So more than 180 international law scholars have joined, have signed this report to make sure they listen. I want to say the UN does not get, they do not get such reports from 180 international law professors and human rights experts. They usually get information from small human rights bodies to which they give much credit and credibility to what they say. And so by the end of the week, these 3 petitions were already sent to any UN agency you could imagine, both formally and informally, to officials, to anyone that you can imagine, not only from me, but also from other experts. And I want to say, just to explain that in order to prepare this report, I started collecting, as I said, first writing this as a legal scholar, I felt responsibility to see back in my own eyes what happened. And I want to say I knew too much too soon. Anyway, I felt responsibility to go over Telegram groups, to collect every information. I can tell you that here in Israel, I understood that people do not know what happened. They were not exposed. And I was already back then thinking, oh my God, this is going to be revealed to the public in a few weeks. This was alone a horrific thought. And so I watched a lot of videos, footage that Hamas themselves took very cruelly. So this report, as I said, was sent to UN officials. It was presented to President Biden a few days later. You've become a source of information to the world, really. And that's when I started seeing, I'll go back for a second to say that I sent these letters, but for weeks, I didn't even get a thank you note, not even a thank you note. And I want to give you one more word about that when I sent it, one of the most influential professors in the world responded, copying all these agencies and all these officials, saying, Kohav, please add my signature to your letter. How can I be of help? And they knew, they received it also from her, and not even a thank you note. Once I saw that days are passing and we're not weeks, and just days are passing and we're not getting any response, I want to say, it never happened to me, not getting any response. I understood that we are facing a wide denial that is starting in the most important places. And I remember telling to my colleagues, listen, we are going on a very different mission. Our mission is not to communicate with international UN organizations. Our mission is really historical, to collect every piece of information and document every piece of information regarding what happened to women. As a feminist scholar, we know that crimes against women are denied, even in the individual case, right? Rape cases, generally, those who were sexually assaulted, they do not seek immediate, because those crimes are denied, disbelieved. And so you would expect those bodies, those international bodies, to respond very quickly. So anyway, once I understood the magnitude of the denial, I decided to go on this historical mission. Someone in the group told me, Kohav, you must give this a name. We're becoming a body, and so an organization. And so we decided on the Civil Commission on Hamas's crimes against women and children. Very quickly, as I said, we became a source of information to many around the world, to prime ministers, to important bodies, and my decision back then was to establish an archive under the most compelling international standards. And I want to say that this decision has really changed my life. We are now in the work of documenting everything, collecting the information, and communicating what we have to, as I said, to the most important officials around the world. And we will also be doing this, sharing this with in legal processes. We are not leading legal processes, but we will assist them. I want to say about that I'm so glad that I decided that this is going to be a historical mission and not a legal mission, because when you have a legal mission, you need to sort the evidence. Some of them are not relevant, some of them are little pieces of information, and I knew that we must keep everything. In my vision, this is like a burnt puzzle. Really, some of these pieces are torn, some of these pieces we will never know. And I can tell you now, we will never know what happened to those women and to those children. And also men were sexually assaulted. This is something that is important to notice. The reason we are focusing on women and children, there are several reasons that I'll mention. First of all, women and children are protected population under international law, that the law itself, international law itself treats them differently because of the vulnerability in conflict areas and in such humanitarian crises. And also, women's bodies and girls' bodies were disproportionately abused as a weapon of war, and this is something that is important to understand. We are non-governmental, we are independent, impartial commission, now transitioning from being a volunteer group to a professional hired staff, working on these issues. The developments at the international level as required are the most professional way of leading this. So now we are in the process of establishing this as really partnering with tech companies, putting these archives in secured places. What else can I say? We even have processes now making sure the information is AI safe, because it's something that I've dealt with since the beginning. How do you know these videos are not AI manipulated? So this is just ridiculous, but I will say this is another part of the denial. But again, I'm looking forward. I know that Hamas and others will try to sabotage our work and to manipulate videos. So looking at the future, we do want to have a signature saying that the information, these videos and footage will be authenticated, and will have a signature that this is AI safe. So I can say that Israeli companies, tech companies, are doing a great work on that and helping us. Everyone are helping us at the moment. So I want to thank you also for inviting me. I want to thank you for joining this. As I said, this is a mission that must be carried by all of us. One thing that I wanted to say is that the reason we're non-governmental was the decision that we took very early in consultation with the most prominent scholar around the world. We thought maybe this could be a government-funded commission. We will have all the resources, we will have access to many testimonies, to investigation materials. I thought I could really lead this as a governmental commission, but I saw, consulting with those scholars, they told us, listen, your credibility comes from your independency, from your academic voice, from your credibility as a scholar, and your ability to be non-governmental. And I think this was probably the best decision that we took very early. I didn't realize, but again, we are seen as an important body to receive information on these very difficult issues. And one last sentence, I'll say, I said it at UN rally, outside the rally, where I almost collapsed over there. It was so moving to see all these women crying, me too, on that side, and it was just difficult. The campus was very moving for us after long days of battles. So what I said there in my speech is that my goal is not only that the voice of the victims will be heard, but that their voices will be our pledge to a systematic change, and a radical change in the international system, in our ability to respond to human rights, to such atrocities, and to secure human rights for generations to come, and for our children, really. Thank you.
I feel very privileged to stay here. Thank you, Suzy, and thank you, Barbara, all of this organization. I'm just a gynecologist in Hadassah, and also, as mentioned, I'm a director of Weaponizing Center. It's a rape crisis center taking care of sexual abuse women. And, sorry, not women, people, victims. Okay, we see also men. We have 11% of our patients are male. This is a multidisciplinary center working like in an emergency room that people are coming after an assault, sexual assault, and treated with at least 3 professionals, doctors, nurses, and social workers, all of them trained for taking care of sexual victims. And then we provide the most important things for the acute sexual assault victims. Acute means to 7 days, up to 7 days. And it's very important because after 7 days, we cannot give so much care. It should be done by other organizational authorities. And we provide the most important thing is the psychosocial support. As you know, the most severe morbidity of sexual victims is mental disease. 60% of them develop some kind of mental diseases, like depression, that cause suicide, like post-traumatic stress disorder, and etc. Then we provide medical care, because many of them would be very sick if we don't take care of them at that moment. For example, there are 5% of unwanted pregnancies after sexual abuse. There are up to 30% with sexually transmitted disease if we don't treat it. So it's very important to provide this kind of care. And of course, what is else we're doing in this center, we are collecting legal evidence, forensic evidence, without pushing or pressing on the victim to give a complaint at the moment. I'll speak in a few minutes about how they feel, but we're not pressing at all. We're just taking and collecting the evidence for having it, even if the victim never complains or she or he complained after 10 years or more. Doesn't care. We don't care. We have the evidence, which is staying by us and police. The evidence, which is DNA and etc., does not expire at all. What is important that you probably know the frequency, the incidence of sexual abuse. Everybody knows that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men experience any kind of sexual violence in their life. So we are talking usually about 25% of the population in women that are sexually abused once in their lifetime. Now, you probably know about hypertension. I hope nobody has here hypertension, but you know people with hypertension, right? You know everything about hypertension, how frequent is that, how you treat it, what are the complications. So sexual abuse has the same frequency as hypertension. Do you know many people who were sexually abused? No. Why? That's because that's one of the crimes, and there are researches that show that sexually abused people feel a lot of guiltiness, feel a lot of shame, and are not conclusive about if it was an assault to them or they were part of this crime. And that's why they are not talking about. And I have to say that the silence of many humanitarian and women organizations is really focusing, or I would say makes it more severe, because what they are saying that, there was sexual assault, there were horrific sexual violence, but it depends on the context. So it's very, very important, and it's important not just for the survivors of October 7. It's important for all sexual abuse victims, because besides seeing, women, or many women here survived those sexual atrocities during war, we have many people who were sexually abused in the past. And they are coming more and more to our hospitals because they have like a flare-up of all post-traumatic disease. For example, excuse me for the graphics, there is some kind of morbidity that's called self-harm and self-victimization. Besides depression and etc., they are having self-harm. They are harming themselves each time there is trigger. They really do horrible things to themselves. And about 2 weeks ago, we had a woman that was assaulted about 10 years ago, but she's still living this situation. And excuse me for the graphics, she was cut herself down there in the genitals. It was so severe that we ran with her to the emergency room, to the operating room, to suture everything. She lost a lot of blood. And she was doing it to herself just because that's what those victims feel. They are not going out of the trauma. This is very important because that's what the silence and the not standing for those women is causing to these victims. And besides being, like a clinician, a doctor, and etc., I'm now involved very much in trying to provide this information to many medical organizations in the world. I'm part of many boards, in European board, in the international board of my second subspecialization, which is pediatric and adolescent gynecology. And we are writing letters to many organizations, and I'm sorry to say, but at least 30% of those organizations, the president, it's medical organization, usually gynecological organization all over the world, and in 30% of them, the chairman is Jewish. And still, they are giving statements like, we are so sorry for the adolescents or for the women that are suffering on both sides, and etc. And no condemnation for the terrible atrocities done here on 7th October. And they are so terrible that, that during wars, it's like a part of the war to have sexual violence. Even in Troya, about 2,000 years ago, the commander of Greek people that were winning the war by Troy said, none of you will say to her and return to his own before he has laid one of the women from the women of Troy. So it was always part of the war that you do violence against women. And it's very important because women was always a symbol of safeness, of harm, and also of the future of the nation. Once you take charge of this woman, you are not allowing anymore the nation to exist. And only in the last century, the law began to be against this kind of behavior and calling it sexual war crimes and even genocide. And we hope that with time, this kind of violence will be less and less. But what happened on 7th October was not less, it was terrible. I never saw such violence like during rape or gang rape. There are fractures of pelvic bones. There were women with with broken pelvis because of so violent rape. And those things should be you as a representative of Israel all over the world should talk about the things, because there are more and more people said we are more and more denial. And it's not because there are not enough evidence. It's not. That's not the point. Because if you know, probably many of you were in Auschwitz, all over Europe, all the concentration camps, there is a lot of evidence. Nobody can argue this evidence, and still people are denied. And that's why we are with women, unless you are Jewish, in We Too organization, unless you are Jewish, that's the point. That's where all of us have to work. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to Europe for a board meeting, and I hope very much to explain what happened here in Israel, and why everybody, every woman should condemn, every woman and every man should condemn the atrocities and the horrible things happened here on 2nd October. And not doing that, it's like betraying all the women. It's like putting a knife in the bodies of all sexual abused people all over the world. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm actually standing here with a few of my roles. I feel I'm here as part of the staff of Hadassah, but also as an OBGYN, or perhaps first as an OBGYN. And I'd first like to thank the three of you, but specifically Kochav and Sherry, for being brave, compassionate, amazing women. And I think, and this is what I'm going to return to at the end, because the question that's hovering around here in the room is, what can we do? What can you do? What can we do together? And this is going to bring me back to the very important subject of female leadership. So you're excellent examples of what I think is one of the things we should lead to. On my way to here this morning, some of you know I live between Mount Scopus and the Dead Sea. On the main road coming up, there was a beautiful rainbow over Jerusalem. I have photos, proof from this morning. Don't tell anyone I took them while I was driving, but there was a traffic jam, so that was okay. Really a beautiful rainbow over Jerusalem, over Mount Scopus, by the way, also, and it reminded me of hope. And that our role as leaders is to always maintain hope. So I'd like to speak a little bit about hope, and it connects to all the things you're speaking about. I have to say that the coolness, the devastation, the denial, they don't surprise me. They don't surprise me. The anti-Semitism, it doesn't surprise me. It's time that we align our expectations with humanity. Okay, humanity isn't going to change. It's not such a great species. But all that's left for us is to do as much good that we can do in the world, inside the places where we can change and make the world a better place. You know, when I was at Harvard, I was still a little cynical, being Israeli, but enough years have passed and I've stopped being cynical, and they used to speak there in the Kennedy School about making the world a better place, and we used to think that was a funny thing to say, but that's what I believe really is what we can do, make the world a better place. I'm going to briefly share with you some things that are already happening at Hadassah, and perhaps together afterwards we can open our minds and think what else can be done. A few years ago, a patient was referred to me in my clinics, an OBGYN. You know, I still work as an OBGYN. She's a woman who was assaulted by her father, sexually assaulted her whole childhood by her father and his friends. She's actually now a social worker, but she's obviously seriously traumatized. So on one hand, she has a normal life. On the other hand, everything keeps coming up and whatever. So she was referred to me by her psychiatrist because her psychiatrist wanted me to treat her. She was pregnant for a second time. And to cut a long story short, she came into my clinic, she sat down and she broke down and started crying and just, lay there, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do. So I said to her, can I please phone your psychiatrist? Because she knew she was referred to me by her psychiatrist. She said, of course you can. So I phoned her and I said, help, how do I start? And she said, you can start by saying, what can I do or what can I say to make you feel more secure, more safe? What can I do, what can I say to make you feel more secure, more safe? That was one of the wisest recommendations I got, and I teach this sentence to all my heads of departments because it's something when we're caring and we're treating not only sexually assaulted patients, but anyone, that's our role as professionals, as caregivers. What can I do to make you feel safe? Perhaps I can't heal you. Perhaps I can't make you better, but how can I help you feel safe? So that, meeting that patient and other patients gave me an idea. It's very comfortable being a director of a hospital because you can have dreams and then you can just ask your amazing staff to make your dreams come true. And we very quickly established a clinic, a corrective experience clinic, where women who were traumatized in the past, whether sexually or in other ways, and because of their trauma, they have a relatively high level of anxiety during the pregnancy before they give birth, are treated by a multidisciplinary team, all women. There's a gynecologist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a midwife, and a social worker who treat these women and lead them through their pregnancies. Now, recently we've started extending these services in different areas. There are further clinics that already exist in Hadassah for treating women or helping women who are having fertility treatments, psychologically, especially women who've had trauma in the past, but not only. And thanks to all these clinics that we've already opened and thoughts that we've had, all our staff and outscopers who work with women, the OBGYN staff, have gone through a special education course in order to make them sensitive to women with sexual trauma in their past. Okay, now these are things that have already happened, but what are we talking about in the future? And I'd like you to connect and perhaps think how as a group or how personally you could help these dreams come true. One, when we move rehab, and you all know rehab, to its new location, so the whole old rehab is going to be empty, and one of the dreams that's going to come true there is that we're going to open a clinic where we're going to bring together all these services that already exist and also open daycare for women who are suffering, for example, from postnatal depression. Okay, a service that doesn't exist in Jerusalem, so it's a body-mind center for women's health. Not only sexually assaulted women, but anyone who has some trauma or anxiety around her women's health. That's one thing that's happening. Another thing that's happening is that we were approached 2 weeks ago. I was approached about 6 months ago already, before the war, to join a new coalition that's formed. It's called the Coalition for Trauma-Sensitive Healthcare System. So this coalition started about 6 months ago, and I'm the only really head of hospital there. Someone who's representing hospital, because they knew about all the services that I'm doing with them, I'm an OBGYN. And the whole idea of this center, of this coalition, is to make the healthcare system more sensitive to anyone who's had trauma in the past, but specifically sexual trauma. And again, this was before the war. And really, literally 5 minutes before the war, we had a meeting where I requested, and it was agreed that Hadassah Mount Scopes would be the pilot hospital for this. And we started building a whole program, and then guess what? The war broke out. And I first of all said, we don't have time for this right now, but keep me in touch. And I sent the head psychologist of Hadassah, Shiri Ben-David, to join the coalition too. And we're going to start building this pilot, okay? So in the hospital. So this is another thing that's going to happen, and I'll keep you updated in order to see how we connect. 2 weeks ago, I was approached by an organization called Amen. It stands for an organization for health, or like a ground or area of health for women, whatever. It's an organization that's existed for a few years. It was established by a woman named Melva. I can't remember her surname right now. So she herself was sexually abused throughout her life, and she opened this village where women who have undergone sexual trauma could come to and spend a couple of months of a very special, unique, multidisciplinary, holistic approach of healing. So I wrote them an email about a year ago because I said, hey, you sound interesting, I want to connect to you. And then they connected me 2 weeks ago because they're now chaperoning the women of Be'eri, of Kibbutz Be'eri, who are in the hotels at the Dead Sea, okay? And they asked us, how can you help? Why did they ask us for help? Because their approach is holistic, it's not professional medical. And they said, and this is something that Dvara also spoke about, that while they're treating these women now, 3 months later, things are starting to come out, right? Because the women haven't shared the information. And now that things have settled down to a certain extent, things have started coming out, and they suddenly stopped and said, oops, we need professional help here. So they turned to me, and what we're going to do now, we're going to build a program in which we're going to make all the services in our hospital accessible to trauma, to women who have undergone sexual trauma. And why Mount Scopus? Because Mount Scopus is the hospital that's closest to the Dead Sea. So again, this is another thing that's happening. And one last initiative that's already started, and these are all new initiatives, is that again, I was personally approached by the head of the rehabilitation division in the Ministry of Defense. Okay, the Ministry of Defense, the Division of Rehabilitation in the Ministry of Defense are those who are in charge really of funding and building rehabilitation for the soldiers and mainly for the soldiers. And she turned to me because she was on a tour of rehab, right? And she said, I think we have to build a unique program for rehabilitation of women soldiers. Okay, rehabilitating women has many different aspects, not necessarily if they were sexually assaulted, but women have different aspects than men. So she approached me and said she wanted to build this program. So none of these things have happened yet. Okay, we're starting these things. And the last thing I want to say is that it all boils down, a lot of it boils down to female leadership. Okay, and now we are an organization of women who do, right? Henrietta said, dare to dream, and when you dream, dream big, and we keep on repeating it. And I think it's time that we really sit down later on and think how we commit to building female leadership in Israel, in the US, and all over the world. Guess what? I already have a plan. And it's based on compassion, bravery, love, gentleness, all the things you yourself mentioned, Sherry. So, I could go on speaking about these things forever, but I think I've given you a few seeds that we can think about later. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And I hear from each one of you is really surrounding the juxtaposition of the unbearable cruelty of Hamas and the incredible compassion of each one of you. Your work is a work of love, is a work of caring, is a work of sacrificing yourself and exposing yourself to the ultimate worst for the good of these women, for those who are no longer with us but who suffered the most unbearable cruelty we can possibly imagine, and for those who are survivors and who we have to continue to treat and take care of. It's almost unbearable, and yet we have to. Part of our responsibility is to bear witness to this, and to figure out how we can act in order to respond. So my two questions to you are, first of all, how can we support you? How can we help you in taking your compassion and continuing to use your compassion towards exposing this unbearable cruelty? I also, on a personal level, just want to know how you're able to balance and how we can all balance the need to witness these things with the need to protect ourselves. And I think it's a question for each of you as well.
This is a new chapter in the relationship between the diaspora and Israel. And I feel like I went to the United States for 10 days. It were intensive 10 days. I've met with so many communities and leaders. And one thing that I realized is that it's not that we are 9 million Israelis that are traumatized. We are really millions of Jews traumatized. Wherever I went, we cried together. I was shocked to see the grief that you all experienced, the trauma that you have experienced, and the shared trauma that we are experiencing as a people. And this is also something that I'm communicating to international officials. And I think this atrocity is so devastating, but it will make us stronger. And it means that we need to form relationships, strong relationships, long-term relationships, friendships between us in a different level of conversations, different conversations between us around this trauma. And so this is the first thing that I want to ask, friendship. The second one will sound silly. I don't know who of you feel comfortable. I started my own little army. I have this WhatsApp group, 2 WhatsApp groups. One of them was already filled by 1,000 people from around the world. The second one is now filling up very quickly, of our people that I meet and that help amplify our work. Sometimes it's just to share social media and expose it in ways that I can tell you. For instance, I've dealt with a denial campaign in Alberta University that seemed to have gaining a lot of support, a denial campaign against what happened, especially to women. And I was able to respond, send this to the WhatsApp group, and everyone were quickly sharing this, and in few hours, the denial campaign was stopped. And also, it's a way for me to share with you that I need a network. I need sometimes a connection to, for instance, to Spielberg Foundation. I sent there a message who can connect me to the Spielberg Foundation. So immediately I got 50. So I feel like you have all your abilities and connections, and this is crucial for this mission. The last thing I want to say is that the hardest part at the moment, as I said, we're not government funded, even though, unlike many other things, the government wants to fund us. They want to give us a lot of, they understand that this sits at the heart of Israel's ability to defend itself. These are issues that the world feels consensus that were deeply wrong, and but we can't get government funds. So we are now, this operations is involving millions of dollars. The budget is huge, so fundraising, not even you, but just connecting us to those who you feel can support this mission. And you asked about how to balance. At the moment, I feel like I must bear witness. I have no other choice. I get, me and my team, we get emotional support. It's not enough, but I just wrote to my team now while you were speaking that yesterday we were watching those videos together. And I felt that just watching this together has made it easier, because I was watching by myself at home and in the university, in my office, and yesterday when we were looking at those videos together and analyzing what we're seeing, there was something in this thing, the fact that we did it together, that was easier. So we're learning how to balance this and the huge responsibility on our shoulders.
So as a physician, as I told you, I'm really taking care of the victims. I had, for example, a lot of interviews that the reporters trying to ask me, did you see, can you tell us about the survivors? No, we're not talking about the survivors. They won't talk at the moment, they will talk later. They will come to our hospitals with a lot of symptoms that are not, we have to be sensitive to recognize that those symptoms are symptoms of sexually abused victims, like understandable chronic pelvic pain, headaches, and etc. And we have to structure to build a special care for those victims, that there will be a team, a sensitive team that will recognize that those symptoms, and they will stay with those victims, because a hospital is a very triggering place. As I always say, for example, a woman that was, for example, a hostage in a dark place, in a small place, alone, totally alone, then she went and she never talked about sexual abuse, and then she's coming to the hospital and have to get a CT. She's going to a small, dark place with nobody that can make a flare of all the trauma, and that's where we have to be. We have to structure this kind of treatment. We're talking with Tamar about it, and this is very important. As I mentioned before, I'm really seeing you representatives for all, I wouldn't say just women, for all men and women that were sexually abused, and they are suffering from the point that people all over the world, organizations are not saying very clearly, sexual abuse or rape is always a rape, doesn't depend on the context. We always believe them. And that's a statement that all the people have to stand for it. It's unbelievable that those women have to think that maybe it's not really wasn't a rape, maybe it wasn't something, maybe it's just a war. And about balancing, it's very, very difficult. I suppose all of you heard about compassion fatigue. And I can tell you a story that once I came from Batami in the, late in the evening, and I asked my daughter, and I saw her going out, and I asked, where are you going? And she said, oh, I'm going to the market here in Machane Yehuda. And I said, listen, you are going to the market, you stay with all the friends, you never go back to any small streets, you don't. And she said, Mom, Batami is not the whole world, it's just Batami.
You asked how we balance. First of all, there is no way to balance. I have to say that from the start. I think we're all very focused on our mission, and even a lot of the dentists who are doing very difficult work, because often you need to know there are 3 requirements for identification. Most of the time, we were lucky if there was 1. You can think about that. So the dentists are doing horrific work, and they happen to be often very young women. I don't know why that is, but that is the way it is. And I asked one of them, I said, we're a little older, we've been through more in our lives, how are you handling this? And they said, we're putting this off until the end. We will handle this when this is all over. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the feeling of most of the people at the Shura base who are doing this difficult work. I want to emphasize, we're talking about women, but the men on this base are working much harder than the women in our group. Thank God there have not been many women soldiers killed. There have been many, but not as many as the hundreds of male soldiers that have been killed. Civilians were treated at this base, so everyone came to this base, and the volume that the men were dealing with and are still dealing with is horrific. I also have to say, we're still under a Tzav Shmona. That means that we are not released from the army. It was an emergency call-up, that's what that means. As of October 7th, many units have stopped their Tzav Shmona, but no one at Shura base. And that is because we will probably, unfortunately, still be needed to do this work for the foreseeable future. The Army is providing a kaban or a kabanit. That is a social worker, a psychologist, and they really are trying to have sessions with us. We have an offer to speak to this kabanit, who's very nice, as much as we'd like. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago where our whole unit for the first time got together in one room. Don't forget, we have been on shifts separately, so 3 or 4 people per shift, so we've never really been in the same room since the war started, and that was very important to us also. And we were able, we're older women, we all think that we don't need this, but you know what? We all realized how much we needed this help. We're being very tough and strong for the younger people, or even because we have to be for the families till this is over, but we need help too. The thing I wanted to ask all of you is just please tell people what you saw here in Israel. You are ambassadors now, all of you, and you have been here. You're very important because you've been here. Soldiers were killed, I'm sure you heard, on Tuesday, and I just want you to know, this is not our topic, but 4 soldiers were announced Tuesday morning that they were killed. My family, my husband and my children, we knew 3 of them. We went to 3 funerals between us on Tuesday. Please tell people back in America that, maybe not everybody's from America, that Israel is different than so many other countries. We are such a small country, and one nuclear family can know 3 soldiers who were killed in a day. That's unbelievable, but that is what our country is. So please, I wanted to tell you that also. There is a lot of pain here on so many levels. We are all post-trauma, I think, every citizen here. And your job, among many things, I'm sure, is please to just tell these stories to people there. You're powerful now. So.
As a man in the room. Because, first of all, I want to thank all your panelists, and please forward this to Kohab whenever you can, because of being in this panel and sharing more evidence that we can take with us for whatever side of this cause we take forward to share what you know, what we haven't seen. We know the stories, we read, but you have been there, and I think that's very important. But I think, Dvora, you said that, reminded us all the time that this 11% of the cases in gender-related violence, rape, and not now, but in general, it's 11%, are men. Still 89% are women or children. And that's because we live in male-dominated societies. In many male-dominated societies, where women are the main victims of gender-related violence. And I want to make that statement. And at the same time, I want to say, before I ask the question, that doesn't make this issue only a women issue. It's a human issue. It's men and women who need to respond in the same level, the same way that our issues now with the war, Jewish issues and Israel issues, are human issues that need to be answered and fought for by any human being who cares about human values around the world. And I have a question for you, and that's, of course everybody will take stories forward, share with friends, share with people, share in any forum we can. But you, Tamar, said, you want to change the world to make it a better place. And usually we say we can make it one step by step. Every small thing we do, we can do. But we represent here 300,000 women in the United States, plus another 100,000 people probably around the world who can make something to create the kind of buzz and noise that we need with this evidence, that we need with these stories. It's great that we do a fight with the academic world. It's great that we find what I call the useless international entities that still need to give a response, like the United Nations. And my question for you is, what do you tell us that we can do?
If we ask ourselves, why do women not complain? Not only why are they more abused, but why do they not complain? Why do they not stand up? The answer is that women need help in order to be brave. Okay, it's not obvious for a woman to be brave and do the right thing. We have here 3 very brave women. Kochav had to go, and perhaps, I'm sure many of you whom I know are brave, sure. And I think that one of our roles as a women-based organization, and I'll keep on saying this, is to think how we help women be brave. And if we have more women leaders in the US and Israel and around the world who come up and say, I'm a brave woman and I'm going to do the right thing and I need your help to do it, then it'll be easier for women to stand up. We need to be able to tell women, be brave, do the right thing. And then they'll be less assaulted, and if they're assaulted, they'll be brave enough to stand up and do that. So let's do something about female leadership, and I'll keep on repeating that.
Yes. What always happens in the international community and the press is this unequal but moral equivalence. And how to fight this on our side in terms of getting the story out. You talk to people and you can tell the story, and ignorantly they say, but look what's happening in Gaza. Look what you're doing. And it has to go, you never want to bring it up when you're bringing it up, but among many, what's the right word? Besides the people that are anti-Israel or anti-Jewish, it comes sometimes from a lot of the Jews. So I think the story and the narrative is, as we're telling it, this was a deliberate act of terror. Mm-hmm. This was not war. This was an act of terror. And war, which came after, is war. And nothing deliberate, was being done by Israel. So I think there's a little bit of that in the narrative about me getting this messaging out. It has to be there.
The proud senator from Pennsylvania, your senator, Fetterman, I believe his name is. I heard a quote of his yesterday where he said, I don't have to show balance. There is no balance here. And I think that if you try to argue with people who want that, you probably won't win, because they're already starting from a point of bias. How can you not have bias if there's such moral clarity? I'm not saying that Palestinian civilians are not dying, they are. But I think it's very important to look at the reason. And on October 6th, they were not dying. This didn't have to happen. I'm speaking as someone who is just astonished as a family of Holocaust survivors, at night, I worked in the World Trade Center in a past life. I was an architect on the 74th floor. Most of my department, I wasn't there at the same time, by the time the attack happened. But I want to say that many people in my department actually were killed. And I remember I was there on 9/11, we hadn't moved yet. And I remember thinking, now nobody is asked for proof or that the people jumped or were pushed. I mean, think about what we're going through compared to past attacks. This is unprecedented, the kind of proof or arguments we are being asked to give. No one asked 9/11 for clarity. Did we ask about, but the hijackers, where's the context? I think you have to look at the senator and saying, we don't have to give balance. There is no balance.
I think that sexual violence shouldn't be a part of a war. And I can tell you there is a master thesis from 2006 here in the Hebrew University. It's not medical, it's anthropology thesis that shows the name of the thesis is the rarity of sexual abuse, military sexual abuse in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm sorry, it's 250 pages, but it shows that in Israeli military is almost no rape, of course not intentional rape. The rape that was done by the Hamas terrorists was more than intentional. That was the main of their war. They were raping aggressively, humiliating. They were raping girls in front of their parents and grandparents, and they were raping women in front of their children. They were obsessive about sexual violence. So that's something that is not part of the world. And the second, what again, in science we say it's not evidence-based. It's my thinking. Is that nobody is talking about Hamas. Hamas is a part of a war, of a conflict with Israel. No, it's not. It's a terroristic organization, and the reason why the Gaza civilians are suffering so much, and my heart is with those suffering. I've taken care of many adolescents in Gaza, in Hadassah, in our hospital. I'm taking care, including surgery, on many adolescents from Gaza. And they are suffering from Hamas. You have to tell the truth about Hamas. Hamas is robbing and stealing all this provision. We are humanitarian provision of water, food. They are stealing it from the civilians. They are making obstacles for the civilians to run out of the front of the places where the bombs hit. We are trying to get them to the safer places, and Hamas is stopping them. So we have to condemn Hamas, not just what they've done to Israel, because maybe if we say what they are doing to Gaza civilians, somebody in the world will have a bit more idea of what is Hamas.
I'd actually like to go back to something I said while I was standing there, that it's time to align our expectations with humanity, okay? Because we can't, those, like you said before, those who want to deny will always deny. They'll find a way to do it. If someone's an anti-Semite, for whatever reason they want to be, because they know nothing, and then they're arrogant and they don't really care, we're not going to change them, okay? But, and those who, and the cruelness of Hamas, so once it's ISIS, then it's Hamas, and the next time it's going to be another terrorist organization, and if it's not against us, it will be, I don't know, in Ukraine or somewhere in Africa. Exactly. So the cruelness exists. That's, we're not going to be able to change humanity. Like I said, we're not that great. And I want to suggest, to wrap up, that each of us ask ourselves what we can do personally. Okay, I've stopped arguing and trying to persuade. I've realized it's impossible, but I say, thank God I have the privilege and the duty, because I have a role as a leader, to do things where I am and to change as much as possible. And it's these, Kochav said it so beautifully, it's these friendships that we've created. I've created so many friendships in the last few months, in the last few years. These chance encounters with people, be aware of them, because together we can make our little world a better place.
Just a very brief statement from someone who grew up in post-war Germany, and we were talking about denial so much. And what I was going to say is that it took decades in Germany for this to reach the stage of acceptance. It took a television series called Holocaust to be aware that the Wehrmacht wasn't clean and it wasn't only the Waffen-SS and that the Germans didn't know. So, you know, keep on doing what you're doing, stay motivated, don't get frustrated. That's something I wanted to say. I just read in the newspaper this morning that the Israeli ambassador to Switzerland, Litan Reshev, she invited 90 journalists to show evidence of what you were talking about, and only 20 showed up, so I got really frustrated. I wanted to ask you, because in the German-speaking press, I keep reading now that all these atrocities and bestialities were only possible because the Hamas terrorists were drugged with heptadone. So I wanted to know if there's real evidence for that, or if this is just part of a pro-Hamas campaign.
So yeah, we have, again, it's not very hard evidence, but at least from the hospitals that they were drugged. But again, in Hebrew, somebody can translate it, Adam nikar bekoso, koso bekaso. So it means that when you are drugged, you are lowering your inhibition, cultural things. But once, just think about people. When they are drugged and they're nice people, they will laugh, they will tell jokes, they will tell nonsense, but they won't kill somebody. If it's not in your soul, you won't do aggressiveness. And that's the point, because people ask me, but listen, they were drugged. Yeah, just to get off of their guiltness. No, it's not. Maybe give them a bit, let's say about 10-20% of braveness or unconscious, but it was in their culture, it was in their thinking to so brutally to violently to rape people. It's not drugs.
My question is more about what rights those women have. When they seek your institution, they have all those supports. But apart from that, what government is doing apart from legal procedures and criminal procedures? What kind of rights they can seek?
I'm not a law person. I think the most important right for those women is to leave them alone, not to try to tell them the story. Because if you said about Germany, so the survivors of Second World War from the concentration camps, part of them, it took 40 years to start talking about sexual abuse. So let them cure, let them stay with their thoughts, let them help, we have to help them. But not to try to get their story. It takes time, and as I said, they will come with other symptoms, which we, as physicians, know that those are symptoms of sexual abuse. You know that those people, sexual abuse people, are dying 4 times more than non-sexually abused. They're getting through surgery almost 4 times more. And that's because nobody understands the symptoms and they don't want to talk. So let them to cure, and we will help them with the symptoms.
I want to thank our panelists so very much. You are all amazing.